Those of you who are just joining us, the jury has reached a partial verdict in the Sean Combs trial. Let's bring in NBC's Rahima Ellis from outside the courthouse in New York City. Rahima, it is my understanding you were in the overflow room as that note came in from the jury. What can you tell us about the mood inside the room?
It was a surreal moment to be even in the overflow room and watching what was happening inside the actual courtroom. The attorneys for Sean Diddy Combs were huddled around him. They were standing, he was seated. They put their hands on his shoulders. A couple of the attorneys, they clasped their arms around one another. His head was bowed. There was a lot of conversation. There was agitated conversation from one attorney and exaggerated. We didn't know at that moment what was going on, but apparently the attorneys knew that there was a partial verdict that had been suggested by the jury. And it was a moment that was almost breathtaking in that his mother was behind him prior to more information coming out, perhaps. She was leaning back with her arm over of the chair that she was on. And then a moment changed and she sat up more straight in her chair and looking. She had on sunglasses, so you couldn't see what was in her eyes. But you could get a sense that this was a mood that was uncomfortable for Sean Combs. It was a mood that says they were uncomfortable for his attorneys. They don't know what it is unless they know something more than we know right now. But the word is that we would hear the verdict. If it's going to be determined that they will read the verdict, it would be read in the open courtroom. But it was a very uncomfortable, unsettling moment to watch this man who had risen to such extraordinary heights in his career, in his business, in the world, in terms of popularity, to see him so humbled, if you will, with others standing around him, trying to comfort him, and again, not knowing why. We don't know what the verdict is. We only know that there is a partial verdict. And knowing that there's a partial verdict, Alicia, has created a tension and anxiety in that room, that even though I wasn't in that room watching what was happening, it was palpable.
Rahima Ellis, I'm going to ask you to stay with us as we keep all eyes and ears on that courtroom. But for now, let's bring in former Criminal Division Deputy Chief at SDNY, MSNBC legal analyst Christy Greenberg. She spent hours in the courtroom witnessing testimony in this case. A few questions for you, Christy. One, walk us through these counts and remind us of the bar that had to be cleared in order to prove the racketeering conspiracy.
So the one count that they are stuck on is the racketeering conspiracy count. That's count one. And for that count, the prosecutors need to show that there was a criminal enterprise here. And what that means is that there was a group. There was an organization of people working together with a common criminal purpose and a common course of criminal conduct. And they have to prove two different offenses for racketeering activity. Now, by two, meaning two acts. So, for example, one of those is drug distribution. If they can show that Combs and other co-conspirators distributed drugs twice, that would count towards the racketeering conspiracy. You could check that box. And notably, the jurors asked about drug distribution. They asked for a clarification on the jury instruction. That is the most straightforward racketeering act that was charged as part of the racketeering conspiracy. So I thought that was notable, and it seemed to suggest that the jurors were looking at the lowest hanging fruit to get them to the racketeering conspiracy. But what's also notable for the racketeering conspiracy is that the jurors came back and said, look, we're deadlocked here because there are certain jurors that cannot be persuaded. That follows on another jury note that we got yesterday, where there was a problem with one juror in particular where they said, after less than 2 hours of deliberating, there's one guy who cannot be moved, and he's not following the judge's instructions. So it seems like maybe that's where the tension is on that racketeering conspiracy. As to the other counts, 2 counts of sex trafficking, of both one for Cassie Ventura and one for a Jane Doe, and then 2 counts of transportation for prostitution, again for Cassie Ventura, one for Jane Doe. And for sex trafficking, trafficking, you need to show that that Diddy used force, fraud, or coercion to cause them to engage in the sex acts, the commercial sex acts, these freak-offs. And then for transportation for prostitution, they don't need to show that these were non-consensual. All they have to show is that he was knowingly arranging for the escorts and for the women to cross foreign or state lines for the purposes of engaging in prostitution. And so that count is the least serious count. It's the one that doesn't carry a mandatory minimum in prison. And that's the one that would be the clearest for them to pass that hurdle. But it sounds like, again, the jury has a verdict on 4 counts. Generally speaking, they have been deliberating for 2 days. The jury requested information that was very specific with respect to incidents where the prosecutors alleged force and coercion were used with respect to Cassie. As a former prosecutor, I can tell you, listening to what they requested in the transcripts, that is a good sign for the prosecutors. They were focused on exactly what the prosecutors want them to focus on in those transcripts. And so I feel, given the timing, that we're only 2 days into deliberating, that's relatively short for a case that's gone on for over a month. Given the time of deliberation being relatively quick and the fact that they were asking about the right things, I feel pretty confident that that there is a likely conviction on the sex trafficking counts and the transportation for prostitution counts, at least as to Cassie Ventura. The fact that they didn't ask anything about Jane suggests, hard to say, but again, given the quick timing, that you're likely to see convictions there as well. So again, we'll wait and see, but it sounds like from reports of what is going on inside the courtroom that the defense attorney have a very similar take, because it sounded like Combs's head was hanging. It sounded like he was, very emotional, that his attorneys were hugging and were kind of surrounding him. They clearly think this is bad news as well.